Disc 4.
Let's now have a look at the services available to aircraft flying outside controlled airspace.
UK Flight Information Services. The services available to pilots operating in Class F and Class G airspace changed in early 2009. In the interest for standardisation throughout the UK, these services have undergone a review and revision. New categories of service have been established and the responsibilities and actions to be taken by both controllers and pilots working with each new service have been clearly defined. It is therefore important that, as pilots, we know exactly what our responsibilities are when receiving air traffic services outside controlled airspace, which service is the most appropriate for our requirements, and what we can expect to be provided by the controller. The UK Flight Information Services are fully detailed in CAP 774. General. Within Class F and Class G airspace, irrespective of the service being provided, pilots are ultimately responsible for both collision avoidance and terrain clearance. The Flight Information Services specify the varying degrees of traffic information and deconfliction instructions or advice that controllers or aerodrome flight information service officers pass to assist pilots in discharging their collision avoidance responsibilities. The environment outside controlled airspace is shared by many users, civil and military, commercial and general aviation, and it is very unpredictable in nature. It should be borne in mind that the service provided by air traffic is therefore constrained by this fact, and also by the fact that the service is not mandatory, the controller or a FISO workload cannot be predicted, and traffic may make sudden manoeuvres without warning even when receiving an air traffic service. The services available outside controlled airspace will be basic service, traffic service, deconfliction service, and procedural service. An alerting service will still be automatically provided in association with all of the UK FIS listed above. Agreement to provide a particular service and acknowledgement of that level of service establishes a contract between the pilot and the controller, whereby each agree to abide by the definition of that service. The phraseology to be used when requesting a service is as follows. Duxford information, Golf Alpha Juliet Golf Victor, request basic service. Farnborough radar, Golf Mike Juliet Delta Echo, request traffic service. Controllers will make every effort to provide the service that a pilot requests. However, it should be recognised that air traffic services resources are finite, controller workload is variable, and air traffic services task priorities may limit the availability of a particular service or its continued provision. Reduced traffic information may have to be applied, or an alternative service may be offered. FISOs are not licensed to provide a traffic service, deconfliction service, or procedural service. Only the basic service should be requested from an FISO unit. Such a unit is easily identifiable as they will use the call sign information. Controllers will inform the pilot of reductions in traffic information and/or deconfliction advice, along with the reason and the probable duration. Some reasons may be high workload, which is not always obvious from the RT loading.
Golf Romeo Golf, reduced traffic service due controller workload.
Or areas of high traffic density.
Golf Alpha Victor approaching an area of high traffic density, possible late warning of traffic for the next 10 miles.
Or when traffic is not displayed to the controller, for example when primary radar is not available, an SSR alone is used.
Golf Bravo Hotel, reduced traffic information, SSR only.
Or finally, when aircraft are operating close to the limits of radar cover.
Helair 22, reduced traffic information from the left for the next 10 miles due to the limits of surveillance coverage.
As pilots are operating outside controlled airspace, any instructions issued are not mandatory. However, the services are relying on pilot compliance as far as possible to enhance safety in Class F and Class G airspace for all users. Agreements. As stated earlier, pilots in receipt of a service outside controlled airspace are not mandated to follow instructions and have a high degree of autonomy to operate. Agreements can be established between a controller, and please note not on a FISO due to the limits of the FISO licence, and a pilot. An agreement may be made under a basic or traffic service to ensure a pilot follows a particular route or heading, or may restrict the flight to a certain level, band or operating area. Here's an example of an agreement.
Golf Alpha Juliet Golf Victor requests not above altitude 3,000 feet per coordination.
Not above altitude 3,000 feet, Golf Alpha Juliet Golf Victor. Or he may say, negative, Golf Alpha Juliet Golf Victor. Here's a second example of an agreement.
Golf Bravo Hotel requests turn right heading 085 degrees for coordination.
Turn right heading 085 degrees, Golf Bravo Hotel. Or he may say, negative, Golf Bravo Hotel. Agreements are intended to facilitate the safe use of the airspace by allowing forward coordination between the air traffic control units on the pilot's course of action. In entering into an agreement, pilots must ensure that they are able to comply with their responsibilities in relation to the rules of the air and terrain clearance. Unless safety will be affected, the pilot must not deviate from the agreement without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. The types of service. Pilots are to determine the appropriate service for the phase of flight and flight conditions. If a pilot does not specify the type of service he is requesting, the controller will normally ask, except for in the following circumstances. A FISOs will only provide a basic service. Air traffic control units without surveillance equipment, for instance radar, will apply a procedural service to aircraft carrying out IFR departures, holding, or approach procedures as a matter of routine. And lastly, IFR traffic that have planned to operate on advisory routes will be provided with a deconfliction service whenever possible. We will begin a more detailed examination of each of these services individually by looking at the services that do not require access to radar or surveillance equipment. These are the basic service and the procedural service. Radar controllers do provide a basic service, but it is also provided by FISOs and controllers without radar. In the two latter cases, unless aircraft are in communication with a particular controller or a FISO, or unless traffic has been pointed out by another controller, they will not know of its existence, as they have no access to radar-derived information. Basic service. The basic service allows a pilot maximum autonomy and is an air traffic service provided to give advice and information useful to the safe and efficient conduct of flights. Such items may include weather information, changes in the serviceability of facilities, conditions at aerodromes, or general aerial activity information. For example,
Golf Alpha Victor gliding activity over Kenley.
Or
Golf Mike Echo multiple aircraft known to be operating 15 miles south of Sywell.
or possibly
Golf Bravo Hotel, Cessna 172, estimating Goodwood at 44, altitude 2,400 feet.
the service is available to IFR or VFR flights, but may not be appropriate for flight in IMC. Controllers may identify the aircraft to aid coordination with other air traffic control units, but it is not obliged to inform the pilot. Identification does not imply an increased level of service, or that the controller is monitoring the flight. Traffic information should not be expected. Outside an air traffic zone, there is no obligation for the controller or a FISO to pass traffic information. General information may be passed to help with the pilot's situational awareness. Regardless of whether traffic information is passed or not, the pilot is responsible for collision avoidance, unaided by the controller or a FISO. The pilot is also responsible for terrain clearance at all times. Unless the pilot has entered into an agreement with the controller to maintain a particular course of action, he may change heading or route without advising the controller. And unless the pilot has entered into an agreement with a controller to maintain a particular level or level band, a pilot may change level without advising the controller or a FISO. Procedural service. A procedural service is an air traffic service where, in addition to the provisions of a basic service, the controller provides vertical, lateral, longitudinal and time instructions, which if complied with will achieve deconfliction minima against other aircraft participating in the procedural service. A procedural service is most commonly found at air traffic control units without surveillance radar equipment, at airfields with notified instrument procedures for approach, holding and departure. Pilots flying in the vicinity of aerodromes, having instrument approaches outside controlled airspace, are encouraged to establish radio contact with the appropriate air traffic control unit. Since the service does not involve radar-derived information, and as traffic does not legally need to be in contact with the procedural unit in Class F and Class G airspace, you should be aware that there is a high likelihood of encountering conflicting traffic without any warnings from air traffic control. The service is available to IFR or VFR flights. Controllers will expect the pilot to accept levels, radials, tracks and time allocations that may require flight in IMC. A pilot not qualified to fly in IMC shall not request a procedural service unless, in complying with air traffic control instructions, the flight can continue in VMC. Aircraft are not required to be identified in order to receive a procedural service. But please note, some procedural units may issue a squawk, but this is for conspicuity only. The squawk will be issued for the benefit of adjacent radar-equipped units. You will normally be advised if this is the case. The controller will provide traffic information on aircraft receiving a basic service. However, no deconfliction advice will be issued on such traffic. And please note that, under a procedural service, the controller has no ability to pass traffic information on traffic not in communication with him. And that is unless another air traffic service unit has advised him. Controllers will pass deconfliction instructions, and these are aimed at achieving a planned deconfliction minima from other aircraft to which the controller is providing a procedural service. Instructions will be in the form of allocated levels, radials, tracks and time restrictions, or may use pilot position reports. But please note, it is essential that in this case the pilot position reports are as accurate as possible. Deconfliction advice obviously cannot be provided against unknown traffic. The pilot is responsible for terrain clearance at all times. If a pilot wishes to operate below air traffic control unit's terrain safe level, the controller will issue a reminder of the terrain safe level and a reminder of his terrain responsibilities. The controller may provide radials, tracks and time restrictions for the purpose of positioning, sequencing, navigational assistance, or to achieve deconfliction minima. Unless safety will be compromised, a pilot must not change radials, tracks or time restrictions without first obtaining approval from the controller. Controllers will normally provide level allocations for positioning, sequencing, navigational assistance or to achieve the deconfliction minima. But please note, if an allocated level is unacceptable, the pilot should advise the controller. Unless safety will be compromised, pilots shall not change an air traffic control assigned level or level band without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. We will now look at the Lower Airspace Radar Service, often referred to as LARS.
The Lower Airspace Radar Service is available to all pilots flying in UK uncontrolled airspace, up to and including flight level 9 or 5, within approximately 30 miles of each participating air traffic service unit. The service is not available everywhere, and coverage may be quite limited in certain parts of the country. It's a discretionary service, so it's not a pilot's automatic right, the main limiting factor being the workload of the controller's primary task. Depending on the hours of operation of the particular unit, it may be available either H24 or solely during the operating times notified in the UK AIP. If, following 3 consecutive calls, no reply is received, it can be assumed that the station is not operating. LARS is comprised of the traffic service and the deconfliction service. The provision of both is clearly dependent on the controller having access to surveillance radar equipment. The traffic service. The traffic service is a surveillance radar-based air traffic service where, in addition to a basic service, the controller provides specific radar-derived traffic information to assist a pilot in avoiding other traffic.
Golf Bravo Romeo Echo November, traffic 11 o'clock, 4 miles, 2,000 feet above. Golf Alpha Victor, traffic left 10 o'clock, 5 miles, crossing left to right, indicating 1,000 feet above. Golf Oscar Hotel Alpha Zulu, traffic right 2 o'clock, 6 miles, converging, no height information.
A traffic service can only be provided by a controller with access to radar or other surveillance equipment. The service is available to IFR or VFR flights. If a controller issues either a heading or level that would require flight in IMC, a pilot not qualified to fly in IMC must advise the controller and request alternative instructions. The controller will identify the aircraft and inform the pilot that he is identified, and the controller will also maintain the identification. Relevant traffic information will be passed and will be updated if the traffic continues to constitute a definite hazard or if requested by the pilot. Please note, workload and RTF loading may reduce the controller's ability to pass traffic information or reduce its timeliness. Traffic avoidance is ultimately the pilot's responsibility. Whether traffic information has been passed or not, a pilot is still responsible for collision avoidance. If after receiving traffic information a pilot requires deconfliction advice, he should request an upgrade to a deconfliction service. The controller will make all reasonable efforts to accommodate this request. The pilot is responsible for terrain clearance. Pilots requesting descent below the air traffic control unit's terrain safe level will be reminded that he remains responsible for terrain clearance. Pilots may operate under their own navigation, or the controller will provide headings for the purpose of positioning, sequencing or navigational assistance. If a heading is unacceptable to the pilot, he should advise the controller. And unless safety will be compromised, pilots shall not change an ATC assigned heading or alter route without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. Note, controllers may issue headings for the purpose of positioning or sequencing, but this will not be to achieve the deconfliction minima. A pilot may select his own operating levels or will be provided with a level allocation for positioning, sequencing or navigational assistance. If an allocated level is unacceptable to the pilot, he should advise the controller. Unless safety will be compromised, pilots should not change an ATC assigned level or level band without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. Again, note, controllers may issue levels for the purposes of positioning or sequencing, but this will not be to achieve deconfliction from other traffic. The deconfliction service. The deconfliction service is a surveillance-based air traffic service provided in addition to the basic service. The controller will provide specific radar-derived traffic information and will issue headings and/or levels aimed at achieving planned deconfliction minima against all observed traffic in Class F and G airspace. Headings and levels may also be provided for positioning and/or sequencing. The deconfliction minima are 5 nautical miles laterally or 3,000 feet vertically against unknown or uncoordinated traffic. Between aircraft working the same controller, this may be reduced to 3 nautical miles and 1,000 feet. Some military units may apply 500 feet vertical separation. CAP 774 stresses that due to controller workload or frequency congestion, the ability of a controller to pass deconfliction advice may be reduced or the timeliness of the information affected. Also, a reminder is included of the unpredictable nature of traffic outside controlled airspace and a caveat that achieving the minima is not guaranteed. Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo, traffic 1 o'clock, 7 miles, crossing left to right indicating 1,000 feet above. If not sighted, turn left, heading 320 degrees.
left heading 320 degrees, Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo.
Alternatively, if the pilot elects not to take the avoiding action, he should inform the controller of his intentions.
Visual, continuing present heading, Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo.
A deconfliction service can only be provided by a controller with access to radar or other ATS surveillance equipment. The service is available to IFR or VFR flights. Controllers will expect the pilot to accept levels or headings that may require flight in IMC. A pilot not qualified to fly in IMC should not request a deconfliction service unless compliance with the service permits the flight to be continued in visual meteorological conditions. The controller will identify the aircraft, inform the pilot that he is identified, and maintain the identification. Traffic information will be passed along with headings and/or levels aimed at achieving the deconfliction minima. Traffic information on deconflicted traffic may also be passed to aid a pilot's situational awareness. Controllers will pass traffic information together with heading and/or level instructions aimed at achieving the deconfliction minima. Traffic avoidance is ultimately the pilot's responsibility. Should a pilot elect not to act on instructions, he accepts the responsibility for initiating any subsequent collision avoidance against that particular conflicting aircraft. The service is only provided at or above the air traffic control unit's terrain safe level. If a pilot requests descent below that level, a deconfliction service will no longer be provided. Pilots can expect a traffic service instead.
Golf Alpha Victor, request descent to altitude 1,500 feet.
Golf Alpha Victor, traffic service taking your own terrain clearance, descent approved.
Traffic service, my own terrain clearance, descent approved, Golf Alpha Victor.
Pilots may operate under their own navigation, or the controller will provide headings for positioning, sequencing, navigational assistance, or to achieve the deconfliction minima. As before, if a heading is unacceptable, the pilot should advise the controller, and unless safety will be compromised, pilots should not change an ATC assigned heading or alter route without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. Controllers will normally provide level allocations for positioning, sequencing, navigational assistance, or to achieve the deconfliction minima. If an allocated level is unacceptable to the pilot, he should advise the controller, and unless safety will be compromised, pilots should not change an ATC assigned level or level band without first advising and obtaining a response from the controller. When it comes to requesting a lower airspace radar service, the type of service requested should be included in the initial call to the radar unit, and the flight details passed using the standard ADD PAR format when you are asked. Remember that whenever a radar service is given, changed or terminated, the fact must be read back to the controller. You will hear this in the following example.
Birmingham approach, Golf Hotel, Hotel Alpha November, request traffic service.
Golf Hotel, Hotel Alpha November, Birmingham approach, pass your message.
Golf Hotel, Hotel Alpha November, PA 28, Falmid to Shobden, overhead Daventry, altitude 2,500 feet, VFR, request traffic service.
Golf Alpha November, Roger, Squawk 2334.
Squawk 2334, Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, identified 2 miles west of Daventry, traffic service.
Traffic service, Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, unknown traffic, 1 o'clock, range 4 miles, indicating 2,400 feet unverified.
Looking, Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, unknown traffic, 10 o'clock, range 3 miles, crossing left to right.
Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, leaving my service area, squawk 7000, radar service terminated, free call London information 124.6.
Squawk 7000, radar service terminated, changing to London information 124.6, Golf Alpha November. Sometimes a controller needs to limit the service being provided. Controllers will inform when they limit a service and ensure that the pilot understands the implications of the limitation. In particular, the service will be limited when the aircraft is within 10 miles of the edge of the radar display, weather clutter or permanent echoes, the aircraft is operating in an area of high traffic density, the aircraft is operating near the limits of solid radar cover, or when the service is provided using secondary surveillance radar only. Golf Alpha November, reduced traffic information, you are approaching an area of weather clutter, late notice of traffic from your left. Reduced traffic information, Golf Alpha November. Whenever there is a change of service, the pilot will be advised, and the information should be read back. Deconfliction and traffic services are both available to aircraft flying outside controlled airspace. Within controlled airspace, a radar control service will be provided. This service is available to aircraft flying under IFR, Special VFR or VFR. Controllers will issue instructions to which pilots of aircraft operating IFR are required to comply, and pilots of aircraft operating Special VFR or VFR will comply unless they advise the controller otherwise and request alternative instructions. As you cross a controlled airspace boundary, the controller will advise you that the service you are receiving has changed. The phrase under radar control will only be used when a radar control service is being provided. Golf Alpha November, entering the control zone, radar control service. Radar control service, Golf Alpha November.
Golf Alpha November, leaving the control zone, traffic service.
Traffic service, Golf Alpha November.
Lastly, when a service is ended, you will be advised, and you should read this back also. Golf Mike Echo, shortly leaving my radar cover. Position is 30 miles west of Daventry. Radar service terminated. Squawk 7000. Report changing to en route frequency.
Squawk 7000. Radar service terminated. Changing to London information on 124.6. Golf Mike Echo. Radio communication failure will be considered in greater detail in the section on emergencies. But for the moment, I just want to point out that when a radar controller suspects that an aircraft has suffered a transmitter failure, but is still able to receive messages, radar may be used to confirm that this is indeed the case. Subsequent instructions will be passed slowly and clearly and may be repeated for clarity. The controller may ask the aircraft to turn, in the hope of being able to watch the radar return take up the requested heading.
Golf Golf Alpha, reply not received. If you read Bournemouth, turn left, heading 120 degrees. I say again, turn left, heading 120 degrees. Golf Golf Alpha, turn observed. I will continue to pass instructions.
Or the ident facility may be used.
Golf Golf Alpha, reply not received. If you read Bournemouth, squawk ident. I say again, squawk ident. Golf Golf Alpha, ident observed. I will continue to pass instructions.
Let's now take a look at the procedure to be followed when we want to transit a military air traffic zone, or MATS. A MATS is established to protect traffic around active military aerodromes. It is a cylindrical column of airspace 5 nautical miles in radius, extending from the surface to a height of 3,000 feet. one or more rectangular stubs may be present, aligned with the approach path or paths to the main runway or runways. These stubs measure 5 nautical miles by 4 nautical miles and extend from a height of 1,000 feet to 3,000 feet. Outside the published operating hours, if no reply is received after 2 consecutive calls, pilots may fly through the mats with caution. Although there is no legal requirement for civil traffic to obtain permission to fly through a mats, because of the possibility of intense aerial activity taking place, it is strongly advised that pilots do make contact with the military controllers to request a transit. Contained within the mats is a normal ATZ. The rules for an ATZ apply within this airspace at all times, i.e., permission to enter must be obtained when the airfield is active. Civilian traffic wishing to penetrate a mats should make contact with the military controller 15 nautical miles or 5 minutes flying time before reaching the zone boundary, whichever is sooner. The main difference in the procedure for a mats is that on the first call you should use the phrase request mats penetration. For example, Cosmos Zone, Golf Sierra Tango Tango November, request mats penetration.
Golf Sierra Tango Tango November, Cottesmore Zone, pass your message.
When asked for your flight details, the usual add-par pattern is followed. Thus, the pilot must pass A. Aircraft call sign and type, D. Departure aerodrome, D. Destination, P. Present position, A. Altitude or flight level, and finally R is your request, intentions, or any additional information you must pass. Here you could include your flight rules, ETA for the boundary, or simply reiterate the request for a mats penetration. A typical reply would be Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo, PA28, Sywell to Newcastle, overhead Kettering, altitude 2,000 feet, VFR.
Golf Juliet Echo, Squawk 0456.
Squawk 0456, Golf Juliet Echo.
Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo identified. Mats penetration approved at 2,000 feet, QFE 1000. Report entering the mats.
Mats penetration approved at 2,000 feet, QFE 1000, Wilco, Golf Mike Oscar Juliet Echo. Golf Juliet Echo, entering mats.
Golf Juliet Echo, Roger, report leaving the mats.
Wilco, Golf Juliet Echo. Golf Juliet Echo, leaving mats.
Golf Juliet Echo, Roger, Squawk 7000. Report changing to en route frequency.
Roger, Squawk 7000, changing to London information 124.6, Golf Juliet Echo. Normally, as you heard, the pilot will be asked to set a zone QFE and adjust to a particular height for the transit. Where 2 or more mats are close together, one unit will be nominated as the clutch mats. Within a mats, vertical position is normally controlled by reference to QFE. If the zones are contiguous, the clutch QFE will be used. That is the QFE at the unit in charge. It is expected that pilots will maintain a listening watch and obey any instructions given. The military controller should be advised if you intend to change either your level or your heading. The next thing I would like to discuss is VHF direction finding, or VDF for short. VDF can be attained from various aerodromes, and these are listed in the UK AIP and detailed on aeronautical charts. The system uses the pilot's radio transmissions to detect where the aircraft is in relation to the airfield. Although VDF may seem old-fashioned, it is in fact quite accurate, considering the overall accuracy of a VOR system is plus minus 6 degrees. A Class A VDF bearing is 3 times as accurate, and it is a service that can be very useful should we become uncertain of our position. Bearings are requested using the appropriate Q code. A QDM is the magnetic heading to be steered by the aircraft to reach the station, assuming no wind. A QDR is the magnetic bearing of the aircraft from the VDF station. A QTE is the true bearing of the aircraft from the VDF station, and a QUJ is the true bearing of the station from the aircraft. A QDM is probably the most useful to us as pilots, or should you wish to plot your position, a QTE may be used. The transmission we make to request the bearing needs to be of sufficient length to enable the ground equipment to ascertain the aircraft's position. To this end, to obtain a QDM, we should state our full call sign followed by the phrase request QDM, followed by our full call sign again. This format would also be used if you wish to obtain a QDR, although obviously replacing request QDM with request QDR. Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf request QDM. Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf.
Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf, QDM 245 degrees, class Bravo.
QDM 245, class Bravo. Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf. VDF information is, again, a must-read-back item, as is the class of bearing provided. The class of the bearing is an indication as to its accuracy. Class A is to within plus or minus 2 degrees, Class B within plus minus 5 degrees, Class C plus minus 10 degrees, and Class D has an accuracy less than Class C, so worse than plus or minus 10 degrees. The words we should use to request a true bearing are slightly different. Here is an example. True bearing, Brentford approach, Golf Oscar Echo Alpha Romeo, request true bearing, Golf Oscar Echo Alpha Romeo.
Golf Oscar Echo Alpha Romeo, Brentford approach, true bearing, tree 16 degrees, true, class Bravo.
True bearing, tree 16 degrees, class Bravo, Golf Oscar Echo Alpha Romeo. There are two types of approach procedures using VDF transmissions, one where the pilot interprets the VDF information and one where the controller does. The former is known as a VDF letdown. Here, the pilot continues to make calls for DF bearings at regular intervals to enable him to maintain the required track and descend to a minimum descent altitude when appropriate. The latter is known as a QGH procedure and is rather uncommon in the UK, being only available at certain aerodromes. In this procedure, the controller interprets the VDF information and provides the pilot with headings to steer to maintain a certain track.
You may have already noticed on an aeronautical chart sections marked as either restricted or danger areas. We'll now examine the services available to traffic in and around danger areas. Pilots may receive either a Danger Area Crossing Service, pronounced DACS, or a Danger Area Activity Information Service, pronounced DAIS. If no reply is obtained from the nominated unit, pilots are advised to assume that the relevant danger area is active and avoid it. Let's look first at the Danger Area Activity Information Service. This will give us in-flight information on the status of selected danger areas and is available from nominated units which are either listed in the UK AIP or detailed on the legend of the UK half-mil chart. The nominated unit will pass information on the status of the danger area. This information will assist the pilot in deciding whether it would be prudent to enter the danger area. This service does not constitute a clearance to cross a danger area. Let's listen to how it's done.
Lake and Heath radar, Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, request DAIS for Thetford range.
Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, Lake and Heath radar, Thetford range active.
Thetford active, routing to avoid, Golf Bravo Tango November Tango.
We will now listen to a pilot requesting a danger area crossing service. When danger area activity permits, the nominated service unit will provide a clearance to cross the area, either under a traffic service or just a basic service. In this first example, the area is active.
Plymouth Military, Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, request danger area crossing service of Delta 009er.
Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, Plymouth Military, basic service, QNH 1002. Delta 009er active, report 10 miles from the boundary.
Basic service QNH 1002 Wilco, Golf Bravo Tango November Tango. Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, 10 miles to the boundary.
Golf November Tango, Delta 009er remains active, suggest reroute.
Rerouting to the north, Golf November Tango.
In this second example, the area is not active.
Golf November Tango, Delta 009er not active, crossing approved, report vacating the area.
Crossing approved, Wilco, Golf Bravo Tango November Tango. Golf Bravo Tango November Tango, vacating Delta 009er.
Golf November Tango, roger. Basic service available from London Information 124.750.
Changing to London Information 124.750, Golf November Tango.
Now I would like to talk about how VFR flights interact with controlled airspace. A basic PPL holder with no IMC rating may cross the base of an airway where the lower limit of the airway is defined as a flight level. This may only be done in VMC, and the crossing must be made at right angles to the airway. The request should be made to the appropriate air traffic service unit. Here is an example.
London Control, Golf Oscar Hotel Echo Lima.
Golf Oscar Hotel Echo Lima, London Control.
Golf Oscar Hotel Echo Lima, PA 31, 30 miles north of Goals, flight level 90. Request clearance to cross airway Bravo 1 at Goals at 35.
Golf Oscar Hotel Echo Lima is cleared to cross Bravo 1 at Goals, flight level 90.
Cleared to cross Bravo 1 at Goals, flight level 90. Golf Oscar Hotel Echo Lima.
Golf Echo Lima, report Goals.
Wilco, Golf Echo Lima.
Pilots may request permission to transit through certain classes of controlled airspace under VFR. You should state the request on first contact with the relevant air traffic service unit.
Essex Radar, Golf Mike Oscar, request zone transit.
When asked to pass your message, the standard ADD PAR format can be used again. The controller will therefore need to know your aircraft call sign and type, departure aerodrome, intended destination, your present position and altitude, also your request plus any other information. As you intend to enter controlled airspace, your flight rules should be included. The whole reason for the existence of controlled airspace is to protect commercial IFR traffic by providing an environment within which all traffic and their intentions are known. Most air traffic service units will have a preferred route or routes for VFR transit traffic. Usually this will be a route where the effects on IFR operations are minimal. It's a good idea to talk to your local units, or en route units if you're planning across country, controllers are generally more than happy to explain the best options available to VFR pilots. To enter controlled airspace, you must obtain a clearance. It is most important that you do not cross a controlled airspace boundary until you have been given specific clearance to enter. Controllers will use phrases such as cleared to enter, cleared to transit, or cleared to cross. Do not enter a control zone until you have heard and read back a clearance using one of those phrases. When you enter controlled airspace, you will be placed under a radar control service. To a VFR pilot, this means that you must comply with any instructions given by the controller. If you are unable to comply, for example, a turn or climb meaning that you are unable to maintain VMC, you must advise the controller and request an alternative clearance. Should you be planning to route close to the boundary of controlled airspace, it's good practice to leave some distance between your planned track and the boundary. With the increasing use of GPS, pilots are often observed flying exactly around the boundary of a zone. Not only does this not allow any margin for error, but IFR traffic approaching the airport may often be only 500 or 600 feet above the base of controlled airspace. This exposes the pilots of light aircraft to serious wake turbulence hazards from the larger aircraft. We'll now listen to an example of a Class D control zone transit.
Luton radar, Golf Mike Alpha Charlie Kilo, request zone transit.
Golf Mike Alpha Charlie Kilo Luton radar, pass your message.
Golf Mike Alpha Charlie Kilo, PA28, Sywell to Biggin Hill, overhead Leighton Buzzard, altitude 2,500 feet, request VFR zone transit on track Bovingdon.
Golf Charlie Kilo, squawk 4672, Luton QNH 1021.
Squawk 4672, Luton QNH 1021, Golf Charlie Kilo.
Golf Charlie Kilo identified, basic service.
Basic service, Golf Charlie Kilo.
Golf Mike Alpha Charlie Kilo, cleared to transit Luton control zone VFR, not above altitude 2,400 feet, route direct Bovingdon.
Cleared to transit Luton controlled zone VFR, not above altitude 2,400 feet, route direct Bovingdon, Golf Mike Alpha Charlie Kilo.
Golf Charlie Kilo entering the Luton zone, radar control service.
Radar control service, Golf Charlie Kilo.
Golf Charlie Kilo, traffic and A300 departing runway 26, climbing to altitude 4,000 feet westbound.
Visual, Golf Charlie Kilo.
Golf Charlie Kilo, leaving the Luton zone, basic service.
Basic service, Golf Charlie Kilo.
There are various methods for obtaining information in flight. We can ask controllers for information, although busy frequencies are not entirely suitable for this purpose, and the request will be handled according to the list of priorities we heard at the very beginning of Unit 1. For preference, an FIR frequency should be used.
London information, Golf Bravo Romeo Echo November, request weather Biggin Hill.
Golf Bravo Romeo Echo November, London information. Begin at time 1320, runway 21, surface wind 190 degrees, 14 knots, visibility 8 kilometre, cloud scattered 2,800 feet, QNH 998 millibars.
Runway 21, QNH 998 millibars, Golf Bravo Romeo Echo November.
Notice that from all the information given, the pilot is only required to read back the runway and any pressure settings passed. Another option are VOLMET broadcasts, which transmit weather information for a group of airfields, as opposed to an ATIS broadcast, which is particular to an individual airfield. The information contained is similar to that included in an ATIS broadcast. The specific frequencies are published in the UK AIP General section and included in the Pooley's Flight Guide. It is usually larger commercial airports that are included in a VOLMET broadcast. The VOLMET content for each aerodrome includes the aerodrome name, the time of origin, surface wind, visibility, RVR if applicable, weather, cloud, temperature and dew point, QNH, any trend, and any relevant items. For example, snowclo, which means that the airport is closed because of snowfall. The runway visual range is a measure of visibility along the active runway. It gives the pilot an idea of how far he can expect to see when lined up on the centreline. RVRs are measured for each third of the runway and are broadcast in the format the word RVR, then the runway designator, then the measured visibility. For example, RVR 26, 450, 600, 450 metres.
Unit 4. Emergency Procedures. It is really important that you know how to use the radio in an emergency. It could be the call for help that saves your life and perhaps also the lives of others. It is essential that in an emergency, RT is as clear, correct and concise as possible. In an emergency, it pays to remember the order of priorities: aviate, navigate, communicate. Your main task is to continue to fly the aircraft safely. Nevertheless, the more natural and efficient your call for help is, the more of your capacity is freed up to deal with the emergency situation. Additionally, the more of the required items you can pass to the controller initially, the less likely they are to interrupt you at an awkward moment to obtain the missing information. There are two categories of emergency which have been defined. Distress, which is a condition of being threatened by grave and/or imminent danger and of requiring immediate assistance. It is signified on the radio by the spoken word Mayday and the Morse code signal SOS. A distress message will take priority over all other messages. The second category is urgency, which is defined as a condition concerning the safety of an aircraft or other vehicle or of some other person on board or within sight, but not requiring immediate assistance. It is signified by the spoken word pan pan or the Morse signal XXX. The first attempt to transmit an emergency message should be made on the frequency currently in use. If this is not possible, the aeronautical emergency frequency 121.5 MHz should be used. An air traffic service unit receiving the initial call may subsequently instruct the pilot to change to 121.5 if the controller decides that the distress and diversion cell will be able to provide more appropriate assistance. I will now talk briefly about the emergency facilities available to pilots on 121.5. The UK has two distress and diversion, or D&D cells, one at the London Area Control Centre, call sign London Centre, and one at the Scottish Area Control Centre, call sign Scottish Centre. Both are staffed by RAF personnel and operate 24 hours a day. The dividing line between London and Scottish is 55 degrees north. Certain larger air traffic service units and some Coast Guard stations are also able to monitor 121.5. The main function of the two D&D cells is to provide emergency aid and position fixing service for civil and military pilots. It is available to all pilots in UK airspace who are experiencing distress, or are in urgent need of assistance, or have general difficulties which could lead to an emergency. Over most of the London FIR to the south and east of Manchester, an auto triangulation, or DF service, is available above 2,000 feet above mean sea level on 121.5. For other areas, DF bearings will have to be collated from several VDF stations, and therefore it will take a little longer to obtain a position fix, as once the bearings are obtained, the aircraft position will be plotted on a quarter-mil aeronautical chart. Once the position of the aircraft is established, D&D can also provide a range and bearing to the nearest airfield, or a heading to steer to reach an aerodrome. Pilots are encouraged to seek assistance from D&D early, as soon as an emergency is suspected. They would prefer that, rather than a pilot leave it too late to ask for help. Pilots may simulate urgency, or PAN calls on 121.5 for training purposes and to experience the services available. But please note that the state of the distress, Mayday, must not be practiced. Before initiating the call, you should listen out on the frequency to make sure no actual emergency is being handled. The phraseology used emphasises the simulated nature of the exchange. You must use the phrase practice PAN. Here is an example.
Practice PAN, practice PAN, practice PAN. London Centre, Golf Bravo, Uniform Golf Alpha.
The D&D controller will either accept the practice or advise you to call again at another time.
Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, London Centre. Continue with practice PAN.
Please note, do not select the transponder code 7700 unless specifically instructed to do so by the emergency controller. Pilots may also use D&D to confirm their position by requesting a training fix on 121.5. These messages take precedence over practice emergency calls, but obviously not over actual emergencies, should the incidents be simultaneous. Again, it is essential to listen out before transmitting.
Training fix, training fix, training fix. London Centre, Golf Hotel Alpha, Charlie Kilo.
Golf Hotel Alpha Charlie Kilo, London Centre. Your position is 15 miles north of Cranfield.
The Mayday call. We will now look at the transmission we should make should we find ourselves in distress. This means we face grave and/or imminent danger and we need immediate assistance. Given that a real situation will be rather stressful, it is unlikely that the call would be perfect. However, it is important that you try to include as much of the information as possible and for ease of understanding in the correct order. In your RT test, things will hopefully be a lot less stressful, and the examiner will expect a very good demonstration of an emergency call. As mentioned before, a pilot experiencing difficulties should first call for help on the frequency currently in use. A distress call takes priority over all other radio calls and begins with the word Mayday, spoken 3 times. The subsequent information should then be passed ideally in the order below, obviously with circumstances and time permitting. To help remember the correct order of the details, the mnemonic NATNIPPO, NATNIPPO, can be used. So, after transmitting Mayday 3 times, a pilot should pass N, the name of the station addressed, then A, the aircraft call sign, T, the type of aircraft, and then details of what is wrong should follow. So the second N is for nature of emergency, and the I, the intentions of the pilot in command. The first P is your position, which is given in terms of the present or last known position, your altitude or flight level, and the heading. The second P is for pilot qualifications, whether you are A, a student pilot, B, no instrument qualification, C, IMC rating, or D, full instrument rating. Lastly, O is for other useful information, for example, fuel endurance or the number of people on board. Although there is no ICAO requirement to include the pilot qualifications, in the UK it has been included, as it is a useful indication to the controller as to the pilot's ability and whether flight and instrument meteorological conditions would prove an additional hazard. Should the call on the frequency in use not be acknowledged, transmit your intention to change to 121.5 and repeat the full Mayday call to London or Scottish Centre. Let's listen to an example of a distress call.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Southampton approach. Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. PA-38, engine failure. Force landing, 10 miles north of Southampton. Altitude 2,000 feet. Heading tree 40. PPL 2POB.
Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, Southampton approach, Roger, Mayday.
If, when you are flying, you hear a distress call, it is a good idea to jot down as many of the details as you can in case there is a need to relay the message or you are invited to lend assistance. Any pilot hearing an emergency exchange between an aircraft and the ground should appreciate that this has priority and should maintain radio silence, but should continue to monitor the frequency unless instructed otherwise. It may be that the controller formally imposes radio silence.
All stations, Cambridge approach, stop transmitting, Mayday.
Or perhaps just one aircraft needs to be silenced.
Golf Charlie, Juliet, Juliet Sierra, Cambridge approach, stop transmitting, Mayday.
Alternatively, all other aircraft may be instructed to contact another frequency so that the emergency may be handled discreetly.
Mayday, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. All other aircraft contact Luton approach 129.550.
At the discretion of the pilot or the controller, the call sign of the aircraft in an emergency may be prefixed by the word Mayday or PAN as appropriate. For example, Mayday Golf Golf Alpha. Pilots must advise air traffic control as soon as practicable when a condition of distress is no longer present. The phrase to use is cancel Mayday, like so.
Cranville Tower, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, cancel Mayday. Engine restarted, request landing.
Golf Golf Alpha, Cranville Tower, runway 14, cleared to land, wind 120, 10 knots.
Runway 14, cleared to land, Golf Golf Alpha.
Had the controller formally declared radio silence, this would also be cancelled, to indicate that normal radio operations can resume.
All stations, Cranville approach, time 17, distress traffic, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha is ended.
If the distress call is not acknowledged on the frequency currently in use, the pilot should announce his or her intention to change to the international emergency frequency, 121.5. Let's now listen to a demonstration of what to do if the original call on the frequency we are currently using should go unacknowledged.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Southampton approach. Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. PA-38. Engine failure. Force landing. 10 miles north of Southampton. Altitude 2,000 feet. Heading tree 40. PPL 2POB. Mayday, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, changing to 121.5. Mayday, 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 London Centre, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, PA-38, engine failure, forced landing, 10 miles north of Southampton, altitude 2,000 feet, heading tree 40, PPL 2POB.
Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, London Centre, Roger, Mayday.
Mayday, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, cancel distress, engine restarted, diverting to Popham.
Golf Golf Alpha, Roger, understand, cancel distress.
And now a look at the relayed Mayday message. Should a distress call go unacknowledged by air traffic control, then any station hearing that call must assume responsibility for ensuring that the message is passed. It could be that the aircraft in trouble is already too low for the signal to reach the ground station. Remember that VHF is line of sight only. The most important thing is to make it clear that the aircraft transmitting is not itself in distress. You should continue to relay messages until the situation is resolved.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Newcastle approach, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha, PA38, engine failure, forced landing 20 miles northwest of Darlington, altitude 800 feet, heading tree 10, PPL 1 POB.
The call is met with silence, and our hero is going to relay. Note his use of "I say again" to make it clear that he is talking about another aircraft.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Newcastle approach. Golf, Mike, Oscar, Romeo Golf has intercepted Mayday from Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. I say again, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. PA38, engine failure, making a forced landing, 20 miles northwest of Darlington, altitude 800 feet, heading tree 10, PPL 1 POB.
Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf Newcastle approach. Roger, your relayed Mayday from Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. All stations, Newcastle approach. Stop transmitting Mayday. Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf. Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha. Cancel Mayday. Have landed safely in a field. I will telephone Newcastle ATC.
Golf Mike Oscar Romeo Golf, cancel Mayday. Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha has landed safely in a field and will telephone ATC Newcastle shortly.
Golf Romeo Golf Roger. All stations, Newcastle approach, time 01, distress traffic, Golf Bravo Uniform Golf Alpha is ended.
End of Disc 4.